All right, so your presenter today is Andrea Taylor, and she is presenting on task-based teaching and learning. She's been teaching EAL since 1999, both in Canada and abroad. She has been with the Immigrant Services Association of Nova Scotia since 2008 as an instructor and curriculum developer. And Andrea has taught a variety of programs, both face-to-face and online, with the labor market language team. So without any further ado, Andrea, over to you.
Once again, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for attending my session. I had a wonderful time presenting last year, actually, on pronunciation with my awesome colleague, Sean. I'm flying solo this year, so I will very much try to, with the help of Mary, answer any questions that you have. I'll ask a few throughout, and I might ask you to post in the forum, but I've also hopefully built in a little bit of time at the end for some questions. So let's do it. Perfect. So just to give you an outline of what we're going to do for the next little while together, I'm going to start off with a quick overview of task-based instruction and hopefully provide you with enough examples and real-life examples of what we're doing here to get you through my basic definition. And then we're going to look at authentic tasks and language. Then we're going to move into some task-based activities for your classrooms. We're going to look at how to break down tasks, which is very important for setting our objectives and making tasks that are manageable and useful for our clients and students and learners. We're going to take a look also at some ISON's curricula and programs. And normally in our meetings, team meetings and also staff meetings here, we start off with client success stories. I think we can all agree that the successes of our clients and our learners and our students, I'm going to use those words pretty interchangeably throughout because we have all here. Those successes are what make us, I think, keep doing our job and doing it well, hopefully to the best of our ability, and help us to keep learning and serving them. So that's how we're going to end off, on a hopefully high note, and then have time for a few questions at the end too. Okay, so let's start off again, as I said, with a definition of task-based instruction. So in a nutshell, task-based instruction focuses on creative, spontaneous language production while centering around authentic, real-world tasks to find meaningful and often collaborative solutions. So we're going to get into, again, a broad definition, but we're going to look at some more targeted examples of this throughout the presentation. So I think something very important when we're looking at task-based is why it's important for us to structure our activities in this way. So I've just created a few bullets to talk about this, and I have a few examples that I'd like to give to support it, and some definitions as well. So task-based instruction uses authentic language, and we defined authentic language as being real language for the real world. So I was asking a few of my colleagues about an example for this, and we came up with just a simple greeting. So saying, "What's happening?" or "How's it going?" or "How are ya?" as opposed to "How has your life been progressing recently?" Which is essentially what we're asking, but it would be a really weird environment for people to ask a question like that. I think we can agree. So we're focusing not only on just language, authentic language there, but also authentic pronunciation, which is a big part of authentic language. As well, we look at task-based instruction providing meaningful tasks. And we define meaningful as something that means something to our clients, simply that they're going to be able to use in the real world, hopefully. So an example, again, of a meaningful task might be answering the question, "So, tell me about yourself," during an interview setting. Task-based instruction also presents memorable scenarios. And I think this is so important because it allows our learners to access the information that they've gained in our classes in a real-life situation outside of our classroom. We can't always be there sitting on our clients, our students' shoulders in the real world. So this is a way, hopefully, by presenting the memorable scenarios with the authentic language through meaningful tasks in our classrooms, that we can sort of be there with them during those moments. And memorable scenarios are also ones that obviously they will encounter, but encounter and matter. So an example might be a miscommunication with a coworker, something that probably, unfortunately, all of us will encounter at some point in our professional lives. So how to move through that. So task-based instruction presents these types of scenarios for our students. It also encourages collaboration with the class and with the instructor. It's communicative, it's relevant, and it uses real-world language to accomplish a specific purpose in a specific situation, so very targeted. And something for all of us to remember as well is that our CLB is task-based. So when you're moving through that document, it's very easy to see that within the descriptions, as well as the sample tasks and the outcomes that are described. Great. Okay. Perfect. So we're important in this scenario as the teachers, but maybe even more important as our learners, of course. So I've got a slide on why our learners like task-based instruction. So it's a pretty easy sell. Learners, by using task-based instruction within task-based instruction classrooms, they get to use a variety of skills to accomplish their tasks. So, for example, they could employ thinking skills, problem solving, critical thinking, use of memory, things like that. The students also have control over how they complete the tasks. And what I mean about that is just that there isn't one set way to complete a task. That kind of leads into my next bullet point, which is that learners can apply and share their experience and knowledge. We're very fortunate here to have so many professionals in our classrooms. It's humbling a lot of the time to see how much experience and knowledge that they bring with them. So to give them a classroom with task-based approach that allows them to use that experience and knowledge to complete the tasks in the way that they feel most comfortable is wonderful. Excellent. So the next point is that our learners can communicate naturally in this approach. And what I mean by that is that it's not scripted. There's give and take in a conversation. It's not one person speaking the whole time and then another. Because of many of these reasons, they feel very motivated in our classrooms and also very confident for a number of reasons. But the most important one for me personally is that, again, they're bringing their own experience and knowledge, and not that they need us to validate it, but it is validated in the classroom when they use it and they apply it to their tasks. They build rapport, which is also very important, working with others, working with each other, and working with the instructor as well. And underlying all of this is, again, back to the motivation, perhaps, that they know that the things they're doing are relevant and that they're authentic and they're going to help them in real life. I'm just seeing in the box, Carol writing that there's a background conversation coming through. I'm not hearing anything, but maybe one of our folks.
I've just muted everyone except for you, Andrea.
Okay, great.
So that should fix it, I hope.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary. Okay, perfect. So let's move on to a few more definitions. First of all, let's talk about what's a task. We define a task as a communicative, real-world use of language to accomplish a specific purpose in a specific situation. So for our purposes today, I think I'm going to give you 3 examples that we're going to revisit throughout. So we have three tasks. First task, writing an email to your manager to tell them that you're out sick today. Second task is making a phone call to your client to clarify information. And the third, making a presentation to your colleagues, everyone's favorite, of course. And I just feel that Dale has posted, learners gain so much confidence when they accomplish tasks in English, no need for good for you comments when they see they can do it. Yeah, and And they often encourage one another in that way, just from getting to the bottom of things in a task. So great comment, Dale. Thanks. All right. So when I was creating this slide itself, I had a moment where I looked at these 3 example tasks and I thought, well, aren't those objectives? And then I started getting a little bogged down with definitions. So I think I'm not going to be loose, but tasks and objectives are sometimes very closely related. And so when we're looking at a task, we're talking about sort of thinking about that thing that we're doing in the classroom. Objective is what we hope people will be doing when they come out. So let me break it down just so that it's not confusing for you or for me. So at the top, we have our goal, which is, for this example, maybe effective communication in the workplace. So it's sort of our big umbrella. An objective might be, for example, with the writing, the first task, to effectively communicate in written English professionally and politely in the workplace. And then the task, to write an email to your manager to tell them you're sick today. So I hope that if anybody was sort of getting those words rolling around in their head, that clears it up of how we're going to use the language today. So the first thing when you're dealing with a task is thinking about how we're going to break that task down. Okay? And above all, the first very important thing is to make sure that you write a clear objective. An objective that leaves very little room for questions. So when we're writing an objective, the idea is to think about what we want learners to accomplish through our instruction. And again, to have that strong, clear focus, thinking all the while about the learner's success. And of course, as instructors, part of our role is to assess. So our objectives should provide a basis for assessment. Okay. Great. So I was going to mention too, in the previous slide, the task was to email. And as I said, the objective is to teach learners to communicate effectively in written English. And again, the goal is effective communication in the workplace. So top down or bottom up. Great. When we talk about our learners accomplishing through our instruction, what we want them to accomplish through our instruction, I think it's important maybe to note here that
Good afternoon.
Sorry, everyone. Just an announcement here for something. Hopefully not a fire drill and I'm safe. My apologies. I hope that didn't sound too loud. Sorry, what I was saying is the first bullet under write a clear objective. What we want learners to accomplish through our instruction. A role of the instructor here, again, is to make things clear. So sort of the approach I usually take, and I'm sure many of you do too, is to introduce the topic or the objectives, or as they say in our CLB book, the outcomes, to give clear instructions for the task and what's expected, to encourage as much input as possible, or perhaps to elicit or brainstorm around the task to give people a chance to warm up. And depending on the level in the class and the appropriateness, you may even want to model. So all part of our objective there, making sure it's clear to our students as well as to us. And then the second part of breaking down a task, we want to identify the tasks that lead to the objective. So I like to think of tasks as stepping stones for our learners, and also for us to get to that final point that we know we've reached the objective with our students, with our learners. And important to note that it might not just take one or two tasks even to reach an objective, depending on the objective. It may take multiple tasks to reach our objective. Great. Looks like we're okay, Mary, with questions so far. All right. Perfect. So the next part of breaking down a task is to clarify what type of task we're looking at. So again, here I hope that I don't bog anyone down with language. I'd like to provide hopefully enough examples that these are clear and relevant to everybody. Okay, so when we're clarifying the type of task, we might break these down into language learning tasks and authentic tasks. So under language learning tasks, we could break this down a little further into enabling tasks And we define those as tasks that focus on form and accuracy, okay, versus real-world tasks, which focus more on meaning and are often unpredictable and more spontaneous than our enabling tasks. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that in a moment we're going to take a look at a really good visual that comes from the CLB 2000 Guide to Implementation. So we'll go through that. But for now, I'd just like to define again, just to give you a little bit of an example. So an enabling task might be using polite language forms, so modals for clarification. For example, perhaps I didn't understand you correctly. Could you explain that to me again? Okay. And that would be relevant to one of the previous tasks that we mentioned, the clarification. Hope that's clear. Okay. In writing, for example, in the previous example, we might want to focus on vocabulary and phrases for writing. Over the phone, an enabling task, an example of might be to listen to a phone call or to read a transcript of a phone call and then to practice a phone call dialogue. So it's more structured, safer, maybe for our clients. They have something to lean on. For the presentation, an example of an enabling task might be to watch a teacher give an excellent or not so excellent presentation and then have them provide feedback to that. So Shauna just posted, we sometimes talk about the differences between skill building and skill using tasks, similar to the difference between enabling tasks and real world tasks. Awesome. And Catherine writes, I often take my enabling or skill building tasks from the CLB knowledge and strategies. Fantastic. And Linda quite agrees. Awesome. And this is kind of what I was saying at the beginning about the language and the vocabulary. I think hopefully we're all talking about the same things. We might just have different vocabulary to define it. So I tried to make this part as clear as possible when we're working through our slides. Okay. So a real world task, again, as I mentioned, focuses more on meaning. And these tasks are often unpredictable and spontaneous, making them a little scarier perhaps for our students. Hopefully not. So some real world tasks might be practicing greeting and farewells in a scenario-based role play, something like that. So again, to go back to those three examples, I'll just use one example, one about talking on the phone and clarifying information. So you might have a class make phone calls in the class where each student has limited information about what the other's roles are. So two students have a phone call, they share a phone call, I have some information, and the other student has information, but we don't know what each other's information is, so that phone call might unravel. Often we've done that here, and we've been very fortunate to have the resources to do that type of activity here, which is great. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. So let's move on to authentic tasks. Claire, sorry, just one sec. Claire writes, I like to give a presentation to give my students a model, what I'm looking for. Totally, exactly. I kind of approach it two ways. So I'll give a pretty rotten presentation, and students are kind of shy about that. They're looking at each other confused, like she just taught us this and she's not employing any of their strategies. She's not using any of that language. And then we also practice feedback, another task that we've done before and leading up to the presentation. Great. Isons has a question. Thanks, guys. What's the difference between a real-world task and an authentic task? Okay, so it's a little confusing because real world, obviously we're thinking of the actual real world, but we're defining real world tasks within our classroom. And authentic tasks, although they do happen in and out of the classroom, they more likely happen outside of the classroom. Okay. I hope that makes sense. Claire writes, I like the idea of them giving me feedback too. We'll try that. Oh, awesome, Claire. Yeah, please contact us. I'm going to come to a slide that talks about some of our curricula, but we have some excellent forms for giving feedback and some really good curricula as well for that, leading up to that. So moving on to authentic tasks. As I just mentioned when I was answering the question from Isons about the difference between real world and authentic, these do happen in and out of the classroom, but we're more talking about them happening outside of the classroom here. And obviously they're meaningful and they communicate a message for a very specific purpose. Okay. And by meaningful, again, I mentioned before, if our clients are in an interview setting, one of the first questions they're going to get is, tell me about yourself or walk me through your resume. So those are very meaningful tasks. We can replicate them in our real world classroom, but these are the tasks that are going to happen authentically outside of our classrooms. Okay. When giving a presentation too, just on the topic, since a few people have posted about that, something that I like to do in my classroom is to have the content of their presentations match something about the learner's target workplace or interests. So that makes it even more authentic that way, and thus meaningful. All right, so coming to the end of breaking down a task. So after we kind of follow through all these steps, thinking about what we're doing and how we're going to build up to our objective, create a lesson or a module using these tasks. And finally, assess our learners based on these tasks. And Catherine writes, happy staff you have there, Andrea. Conversation coming through. Yeah, they're pretty happy. Okay, there's just some people talking outside the door here. And Jenny writes, so a real world task is like a practice authentic task. I like that. That makes sense, Jenny, yeah. So thinking about our classroom as a real world environment. Again, I don't want to repeat myself or precede something I'm going to talk about, but an example of that for the phone call might be, instead of having the students in the classroom back to back, for example, doing a phone call scenario role play. You might actually be able to put them in separate rooms so that they're actually using a phone and talking to each other that way. So that would make your real world task even more authentic. Awesome. Okay, so I just wanted to mention on the assessment side, again, two words that we throw around a lot in assessment, the formative and the summative. And again, this is a topic totally for another presentation. But formative assessment, again, allowing the instructor to assess the learners while they're doing those activities. So while they're giving a presentation or while they're practicing a role play, you're able to observe, listen, and assess. Whereas summative allows the instructor to more give a final assessment. For example, here we do the CLB exit task. And I wanted to mention too, in terms of the creation and assessment of lessons, a tool that we use here a lot is the Canadian Language Benchmarks Guide to Implementation 2000, CLB 2000. And I wasn't sure if that was available, but it actually is. It's available online to download. We have a few paper copies kicking around here too. Okay, so Sabine had a comment in our chat box. You might consider sending your students out on a mission, I love this, to complete an authentic task too. They could go to a pharmacy, ask the pharmacist questions about over-the-counter medication to take. Yeah, awesome. Any kind of activity like that, if you are in a place that allows you to do such a thing and have them come back and debrief about what happened, or even assign such a task as homework, that would be awesome. Thanks, Sabine. Okay, so this was the visual that I was talking a little bit about earlier, just to sort of give the continuum of enabling tasks or activities versus, not versus, but leading into, I should say, real world tasks. And again, I know real world and authentic, they're synonyms, but the real world tasks we're going to talk about here, we are creating those in our classroom. Sorry. Awesome. So an enabling task, and just follow along, I'm just going to go from left to right here. With enabling tasks and activities, we're building up those skills, whereas in the practice, the real world classroom task, we're going to be using those skills. So develop isolated prerequisite skills, again, just kind of like what Jenny was saying, the real world task is like a practice authentic task. So yeah, develop the skills, and then again, within the classroom or beyond, depending on where you're at, real world or moving on to authentic, provide the rehearsal for authentic tasks beyond the classroom. Okay, perfect. And that goes back to, again, our tasks being memorable, so that we're allowing them to build up those prerequisite skills, to rehearse and practice those skills in a safe environment, but still a real-world classroom environment, and then going, not physically going with our students, but hopefully going with our students here with the language to help them do those tasks in actual situations, authentic situations. So enabling tasks focus on form and on accuracy. The real-world tasks are focusing more on the fluency and making meaning, communicating meaning. Great, some comments coming in. Shauna says, oh, thank you. Sorry, Catherine commented that it's a great chart, very useful. I thought it was a great visual as well. Some of my colleagues here used it in a previous presentation, so I borrowed it from them. The source is, again, CLB 2000 Guide to Implementation. And Shauna writes, I agree, such a great chart to make the distinctions clear for not only teachers but students as well. Absolutely. Yeah, especially our higher level students. Great. A few more comments coming in. It's a very useful resource. And also CLB 2000 Guide to Implementation is available on the CCLB bookshelf, bookshop.language.ca. Well done, people. Thank you. Awesome. I think when you're first starting to go through it, like if you're anything like me, you become a little bit overwhelmed with the amount of vocabulary there. But a visual like this, I think, just helps us to follow it through and make important distinctions. All right. Great. Okay, so word I love because it's so visual. Provide maximum scaffolding versus provide minimum scaffolding. So again, in the enabling section, we are providing activities that help our students build up confidence and options, I guess, language options. Whereas when we move into the real world task on this point, they have to recall these language functions, for example, themselves. And this is important for them to be able to accomplish their goals. Okay, moving down. Enabling tasks and activities may involve controlled practice through manipulation of discrete grammatical or phonological terms. I had to wrap my head around that a little bit, of forms. Basically, practicing grammar and pronunciation is what I came up with on that point. I hope that's how everybody else interpreted that one. Whereas a real-world task may require negotiation of meaning to ensure message is understood. So an example of that one, I had practicing grammar and pronunciation, for example, modal forms, reduced modal forms, not only practicing them maybe with pronunciation. Students are comfortable with that. So for example, would ya or could ya, at least with their listening skills. And another one that I thought of for real world importance is if we have students who are working at restaurants or pubs, taking orders, the difference in pronunciation between the T and the teen, so 50 versus 15, makes a big difference when you're ordering chicken wings. Okay. So enabling tasks and activities require limited resources. So meaning, you know, a drill activity, something like that. You don't need to have a big stage to have these kind of things in your classroom, which is great because anybody can use them. Moving on to real-world tasks, they need comprehension to complete the task. So meaning they have to, the students, the learners must understand the content from the drill that we've done in the activity stage to apply it to the real life, real time, on the spot experience. Okay. Enabling tasks, often in my classroom, they are very communicative, but they don't have to be communicative. Whereas when we're moving into the real world and then authentic tasks, they're communicative, for sure. Enabling tasks and activities, you're able to manage them as the instructor, whereas when you move into the real world, it's like giving them the driver's seat, the wheel. So the learners manage those tasks themselves. Okay. So I hope that makes everything clear as a bell, somewhat anyway, moving ahead. And again, I really like the visual. I was glad to read a few comments of other people liking that, making it clear. All right. So let's go back to those examples that I had before, tasks. So task-based activities for EAL classrooms. And just to reiterate, we had an email to your manager to tell them that you're out sick today, a phone call to your client to clarify information, and again, everyone's favorite, making a presentation to your colleagues. No sarcasm there at all, as I make a presentation to my colleagues in another room and a bunch of other people. All right. So to make this hopefully practical for everybody, let's break this down and take a look at the task itself, okay? Oh, thanks, Suma, right. Great examples of activities. Again, you can make them, obviously, there's a million to choose from. The CLB book is great for lots of different examples and taking it outside the box. But honestly, when in the classroom, I have the curriculum, but it's great to be able to modify the tasks and the content of those tasks based on the present or future jobs of the students that are in my room, their fields. More buy-in. All right. So again, the task is to write an email to your supervisor to tell them you're out sick today, something none of you did. Good job. So a few examples of enabling tasks around this objective or task. Again, the words kind of go back and forth. You might look at some enabling tasks around addressing levels of formality in writing. So for an email to a supervisor, depending on how long you've been working at that place or the relationship that you have with your supervisor or manager, it might be semi-formal or it might be formal. For many of our students, it's important to also show examples of informal communication to make sure that they're seeing the distinction there and not making mistakes in their writing by being too informal, using informal vocabulary or short forms of words, things like that. A danger these days with texting. So I mentioned common language functions for writing an email. Another one that one of my colleagues suggested was email phrases, so just simple openings and closings, making sure that those are appropriate to the task and to the level of formality of the business writing. And then email format and etiquette. So by format, I just mean the structure of an email, the white space when you're writing an email, the introduction sentence, hi, Carol, I hope you're doing very well today. The body, I'm afraid I have to tell you that I won't be in today because, and the last paragraph, if you have any questions, please contact me at home, something along those lines. So again, that structure or format. And then the etiquette as well. So when writing to a coworker versus when writing to a supervisor, formality comes into play there as well, and also word choices. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. Okay, so again, enabling tasks. We're looking at form, we're looking at accuracy. And then we move that into a real world task. And just for clarification, I've put classroom in brackets on the slide to make sure that we're thinking about the real world as being our classroom. We're simulating those authentic tasks. This was mentioned in the chat. We're very lucky here at ISONS to have a computer lab. And we're even luckier if we can book time because everybody is always in there. So something we like to do here with our students, especially in the afternoon classes, the labor market language classes, is to book time and go to the computer lab to have our students, our learners, type emails. And they can type them to one another or they can type them to the instructor. So one of my colleagues mentioned that she likes to have her healthcare professional students write emails to one another so that there's a bit of back and forth and then they can see the thread of emails and then assess them. Okay. And she might work that in a reverse way as well, so have that real world experience and then bring examples of what her clients produced and bring it back into the classroom to work on it from more of an enabling task structure. Navnish writes, great point. Sometimes level of formality is the most difficult thing to grasp for ESL students. For example, when do you move from full name to a first name basis? That's an awesome point. And we find that here as well with our students. And it's just so important for making that strong impression and not being judged, people thinking that our learners are less professional because they're not using certain forms. And I agree with Lori. Great point, Nav. Super. All right, so I hope that makes sense. Again, breaking it down to the actual example of a task. So let's try that again. Okay, so I don't know about your students, but my students are not crazy about using the telephone. In fact, they're pretty scared of it. They much prefer face-to-face communication because they have a sense of people based on their body language and whatnot. So the telephone can be a pretty scary thing for my students, although I think we can all agree for most people it's required. So allowing our students to practice that is great. Sang Kyun writes, can someone recommend some books regarding TBL if any of you are using them in the classroom? Great. Maybe Mary could save that one too and could have some discussion about that. That's great. Perfect. Okay, so another task, make a phone call to your client to clarify information. Again, oh, thanks, Mary, perfect. So again, very important and often not on the top of the want to do list for many of our students and learners. So some enabling tasks that I came up with for this one, and I'm sure you guys have lots more examples, don't worry, next slide you're going to get a chance. So enabling tasks for this one, again, common language functions, specifically for clarification. So things like, could you say that slower? Could you elaborate on what you said about the date? And when we think about clarification, we want to make sure that we're pointing out to our students that clarification isn't, could you say that again? Could you say that again is repetition, and it's not the same as clarification. So we want to make sure students understand these differences in these phrases, because if they don't, when they use these phrases, they're not going to get the expected result that they want, and that's going to cause confusion. And Michelle writes, great distinction. I think she's talking about clarification, repetition. Yeah, it's very important. A lot of our students, when they're going to job interviews, something we teach them is, ask for clarification or rephrasing of the question. But unless you want to hear the question exactly the same way again, don't ask for repetition. Okay. Great. So again, common language functions for clarification. Practice clarifying information using these phrases within the classroom, so in small groups or pairs. Again, focusing on formality or tone. So practice clarifying information for phrases. This could be something like reading a scenario and filling in the blank spaces with appropriate clarification phrases. Something that I do as well is just have them categorize a list of different phrases under the correct language function heading. And again, I often use clarification and repetition together because those two are very important to be distinct from one another. Okay. So formality and then tone on the telephone is so important. I think you can all agree, because we want to sound friendly on the phone. We don't have a web camera to show the smile, for example. So using proper intonation and a friendly tone of voice. Okay. And also upward and downward intonation to indicate we're not done versus maybe we're done a point. So also something that we can simulate within our classrooms and practice before putting them in the actual practice time, the real world situation or the authentic situation that they'll find themselves in inevitably. Something else that's great for our students, and I'm sure yours as well, is looking at indirect and direct language. I think we can all agree this is quite cultural. So instead of saying, say that again, saying, could you say that again? So just inserting a helping verb, a modal auxiliary verb there to help with softening that phrase, for example. So being a little more indirect versus being direct. I hope that's a good example for everybody. Okay, and then a real world being the classroom, once again, task. Having learners get different information cards and and then they have to call one another from different rooms. I think I mentioned this example before. Perfect. So let's move on to the next one. If there are no questions at this time, I'm happy to address any. I like that people are just sort of commenting. So let's put you guys in the driver's seat a little bit. So I realize some of you might be tuning in on your own. So you can talk to yourselves if you like, go for it. But if you're in a group, you might have a few people with you. So just with a partner or a small group, I'd like to give you guys about 5 minutes to just brainstorm some enabling and some real-world tasks for this task. So everybody's favorite again, make a presentation to your colleagues. Okay. Oh, Sabine, I didn't need to know that. We have 94 participants. I thought I was just talking to myself. But thank you. That's great to know that everybody's tuned in. Hopefully this is helping. Great. Awesome. Sorry, so take 5 minutes and do a little brainstorming around making a presentation to your colleagues. Think of some enabling tasks and, if possible, 1 or 2 real world or classroom tasks. Thanks. I wish I were a little closer to where my ISENS colleagues may be watching or listening to hear what they're talking about. Just had a colleague check in on me. Thumbs up. Thanks, Jennifer. So some input coming in here. Raymond Klassen writes, in terms of making a presentation, I asked my clients to write an introduction using a standard essay introduction format, broad to general, and speak it to their classmates and get their classmates to respond with, I want to listen to the rest, or it's unbelievable. I love conferences. Joan Porter writes, I like when the task result is its own reward, like if I receive your voice recorded attachment via email and respond to it. You know, you were successful in the task. Sort of like if your student tells his partner a joke and he makes his partner laugh. He did the task successfully. Nothing like authentic rewards. Yeah. Wonderful. And then Raymond follows up with doing this so that students would give immediate feedback as to whether the presentation introduction was engaging or supportable. Great. I think style plays a big part in presentations for sure. Typical teacher here. I'm having a hard time being quiet while you guys do this task. And please, if you're brainstorming with somebody or if you're just on your own, feel free to start posting in the chat box. It's always great to share those. Awesome. Some feedback coming in. Please continue. Again, this will all be available and I'll read these out loud. Ryan Drew writes, Catherine and I brainstormed together and came up with things like body language, eye contact, pacing, font size, and amount of text on PowerPoint slides, connecting with the audience, determining the appropriate level of formality for this group of colleagues. So awesome. Great. And Catherine follows up with enabling body language, voice modulation, pronunciation, handling interruptions. Absolutely. Michelle writes, checking understanding. Fantastic. Great comment, Christine. Christine writes, even handwriting practice at a visible size, you might have to use a whiteboard or flip chart. We're so caught up in technology, or going back to basics a little bit. So true. Really good point. Okay. So anyone else who has any enabling tasks, please start posting them in the chat box if you're able to. Teresita writes, also teach how to speak to your points rather than reading them. Good point. Sabine writes, how to find out more about the audience. Good. In terms of formality or even their interest. Jen writes, identifying emotions from the audience. Wow, that's great. Thank you. Thanks again, everybody. I hope that was kind of fun with the online. I wasn't sure how to incorporate a little task for all of you. But here's what I came up with, some basics, and I think you've come up with some amazing ideas there, especially with the enabling tasks. So the structure of a presentation, the introduction, the body, the conclusion rather. Okay. So something I do in my class, again, as I go over the structure or the outline of a typical presentation, I have the students choose their own topics. And adversely, I sometimes give out random topics to the students and just drill filling out the form quickly and giving a quick 1 to 2 minute presentation on that, just to show them that it isn't that hard. Because again, like the phone calls, my students tend to be a little nervous about giving presentations. Language functions for making a presentation. So introduction phrases, how to give a reference to something that you're talking about, giving credit, wrapping things up. Okay. Great comments coming through here. Have students, Christine writes, have students view a few presentations in order to look at form and to critique them. Awesome. If they can understand what makes a good or bad presentation, theirs is more likely to be a good one. So true. Katie was asking about the CLB level that I teach. I'm going to talk about my students in a little bit, but the current class that I teach is a level 6+. CLB 6 class. Something else that might be a good enabling task that I came up with when I was looking at this one was the styles of presentations. Okay, so different introduction styles, for example, which I think speaks to a comment someone had about enticing people from the beginning. Make a quote, make a joke, ask a question, tell a story, maybe use statistics to add some shock value to the beginning right in your introduction, or just the standard give your outline, which is kind of what I did at the start of my presentation today. Okay, some more great comments coming through. And really for a real-world classroom task, get them giving as many presentations as possible for the entire class. Get everyone involved. Great. Something else that I'm very lucky to have happen in my class is to have someone from Toastmasters come in and give a presentation about giving a presentation. So that's very inspiring for many of my clients, my students. Okay. So I think, again, we can all agree that making our classrooms mimic real life is absolutely essential for our students. I know here at ISONS it is absolutely essential for our students as they are moving into the real world quickly. Most of our clients are active job seekers currently, or they plan to be looking for work soon after completing our programs. So I think in general we feel it would be a disservice to our clients not to mimic real life within our classrooms here. And something else that we do quite explicitly here is we teach strategies related to language to give learners confidence within those challenging situations when we're not there with them. Okay. Something else here that I think we can agree on is that language and culture are very interwoven. And with that, knowing more about language and culture, it helps our clients to build that confidence that they need in those unfamiliar situations, and it makes them better prepared for those real life situations, especially high stakes situations, for example, in their new workplaces. I'm not going to talk much about essential skills, but I highly encourage all of you who are interested and don't have a lot of information about essential skills, or even those of you who do. My colleague Jennifer Mizzi will be giving an excellent presentation later today on essential skills. And we incorporate essential skills with task-based instruction. It's very natural. The two of them lend really well to one another. And again, the relevance is there, and our learners are able to understand what's expected of them in a Canadian workplace. And so I think essential skills lends itself nicely to this. And I think Ryan agrees. Ryan Drew writes, essential skills is an excellent addition to what we already do with the CLB and very task-based. Exactly. Thanks. Super. So I mentioned before that at ISONS we do have some developed curricula within our programs. We're very fortunate to have that. Our classes and curricula that are currently being taught at ISONS use task-based instruction. So I thought this was worthwhile to mention because the curriculum is available to people. So just quickly, in our sector-specific classes, we have communication for engineers. We also have communication for healthcare professionals. The class that I teach currently, communication for work and business, is a general workplace class, and again, the curriculum is developed. Listening and speaking at work and workplace cultural communication, parts 1 and 2, are both online courses that we have curriculum built for. And our writing classes, which currently are very popular online, workplace writing 1, 2, and 3. And finally, our pronunciation classes. We have an online pronunciation class called Clear Speaking, for which we've developed curriculum here, and pronunciation and communication at work. This was something I developed about 3 years ago, and I'm so excited to see it working in the classroom, and currently that curriculum is in development. So if anybody is interested in our curriculum, please contact Carol Derby. She's my manager. She's the manager here of Labor Market Language, and she's more than happy to answer questions or to give you some more information. So Carolyn, I would encourage you to contact Carol, and she can certainly give you some more information. Great. Mary, am I doing okay on time? think I've got about 3 minutes. Oh.
Yeah.
When I ran it through, it wasn't quite this long. Okay, so as I mentioned at the beginning, something that I think makes our lives worthwhile, what we do worthwhile, is those success stories. And I didn't have to think too much to come up with a really good success story. This was a communication for work and business class. You can see them in the picture that I had about 6 to 7 months ago, I think now. And of the 8 participants, 7 are now working within their field, and 1 is in a program through Nova Scotia Community College and will be an active job seeker this June, and I fully expect to hear a success story from her by the end of the summer. So you can see here a range of different professions, and for each of them, I received feedback over the months about the types of things that we did in the class that they're finding useful in their work now. So just to run through, again, the Communication for Work and Business class it's a 3-month class. We've worked it into 3 modules. It's 15 hours a week class time, and there are 7 modules total that we teach within those 3 months. And it's all task-based, as I said. So things that were talked about were understanding indirect requests, business writing, definitely customer service language, for quite a few as well, giving presentations, very important. And language for negotiation, again, going back to all the common language functions. So these were my students, and I couldn't be more proud. They're doing me proud out in the workplace and doing well. So I just wanted to share that with everybody as a source of inspiration, hopefully. So I don't know if we have any time for questions or if any questions have come up, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for attending, everyone. And if you have any follow-up, again, we'll be on Tutela, but also my contact information here at ISONS, my email. So nice. All the thank yous. Thanks so much. Mary has one quick question. Hopefully we can do. Oh yes, the question earlier from Sankyong. Can someone recommend some books regarding TBL if any of you are using in the classroom? So if anybody has any suggestions for that, maybe we'll carry that over on to Tutela, but always great to share resources in that way. Awesome.
Yeah, I think Tutela is going to be a great place to continue this discussion. Thank you, everyone, for participating in this session. Thank you, Andrea, for presenting. It was great.